What is the difference experientially between agency and non-agency? Sometimes I get the question about free will. Is there free will? Do you believe in free will? Do you experience free will? And I'm hesitant to answer this question for a few reasons. One is it's conceptual. Another is I'd rather you wake up to the truth of what is and discover it for yourself, rather than me giving you a framework which puts you at risk of comparing your experience to that framework to see if you're there yet. So I'm pretty disinclined to answer that question outright. But we can get at this by looking at the difference in experience between experiencing reality through the framework of an agent and experiencing reality without that framework. And as always, this is an experiential pointing, meaning it helps to feel into it, to find it in your own experience now, rather than try to impose what I'm talking about onto your experience. Or even worse, memorizing what I'm saying and just believing it is this way or it's that way. So really follow along, feel into your experience, find these elements that I'm going to point to and see if it doesn't open something for you. So when we experience reality through the lens of agency, we always feel like we're holding the reins of our own life. And it's not a comfortable feeling most of the time. Sometimes it feels like excitement. We're excited about a goal, or we're excited to accomplish something or get something done. But often it feels like hesitation, doubt, frustration, confusion, disorientation, and like there's a big burden on you to get it right. Like there's a way to get it right. And underlying that, there's often a feeling or a pervasive sense that I don't get it right, or I'd never get it quite right. So all of that experience is the lens that I'm calling agency. Without that lens, you don't experience that. But with that lens, with that sense of the agent, the one holding the reins, the one in charge, the one responsible, the one at risk of making a mistake, the one whose duty it is to correct the fundamental problem of you in your life. That sense, that lens is a process. It's a mental process. It's not an identity. It's not who or what you are. But it's formed from the sense of identity. It's formed from the mechanism that constructs identity in the most basic way. The purpose of this conversation, though, is not to talk about identity specifically, but rather the sense of agency, the lens itself, how it functions, how it operates, how it feels, and what it's like to experience reality without that lens in place. So we can all relate to this, holding the reins of life, pushing the gas pedal and the brake at the same time, struggling with the world, struggling with ourselves, struggling with others, always feeling like we got to figure out a better way or a new way or a different way, or we just have to keep doing what we think we've been doing that seems to work to some degree, and we have to maintain that effort somehow. And then conditions change, and sometimes we have a fixation where we don't want to change with the conditions. We're kind of fixated in our comfortable efforts. Other body minds have a different composition. They're more the opposite. They feel like they always have to change. They need something new all the time. There's a striving for new experiences and new sensations and textures. But both of these are fixations. And what's interesting is the polarity between these fixations plays out in society in various ways, including political, argumentation and so forth. But they play out within us as well. But they're both fixations, and they're both based on doership. They're both looking through the same lens with a different angle or a different preconceived idea of how the lens works. But if you believe either one, there's a fundamental misperception operating. So what happens when that lens isn't there? What happens when we somehow set the lens aside? Or better yet, shatter the lens? What is that like? Well, a simple way of saying it is we don't take reference from the mind to explain or approach or navigate what's happening. The approach, the navigation is spontaneous. It requires nothing of us. The navigation of life requires nothing. It doesn't require an approach or a strategy. It doesn't require energy. It doesn't require input. It doesn't require figuring it out. It doesn't require holding reins. It's seen that that was all an illusion. So what a beautiful thing to be free of the illusion of having to figure out whether I'm the kind of person that likes to keep things the same or the kind of person that likes to change things and mix them up. Progress, regress, hesitation, effort, over effort, all of these illusions are seen to be just that, illusions. And the spontaneity that is natural, simple, here already, always the case, is how we move through the world. How everything moves through the world. Now, I'm using terms like the world and movement and so forth, sort of conventionally here, and that's okay. I'm not trying to deconstruct time or form in this pointing, but this aspect does come hand in hand with those other insights. It's a big deal. Experientially, it feels like such a relief. It's a relief from the shame, because shame says I just can never get it right because I'm not right. There's something wrong with me, and if there's something wrong with me, I'm never going to get that right. So I'm better to just do my best and hide the shame from myself and others. What a relief to realize all of that was just a reflection or a shadow of the belief and agency that never existed, that doesn't exist, that doesn't need to exist. So there's a spontaneity. We take reference about what's happening from what's happening only, not 1 millimeter apart from it, or 1 millimeter ahead of it, or 1 millimeter behind it, or 1 second behind it, or 1 second ahead of it. It's just what's appearing as it's appearing, what's moving, what's coming, what's going, as it's coming and going. So everything is met naturally and spontaneously. We don't even have to do the meeting. We're not in charge of that. We're not in charge of anything. And that's really a huge relief. It makes everything different. It turns everything on its head, the idea of responsibility and duty and effort and practice. But importantly, it doesn't just negate all of those. It doesn't just say all of those are the opposite of what we think they are, because that's still looking through a lens. And this leads to some confusion in certain kinds of spiritual pointing or non-dual pointing. It's not like the illusory personal will is replaced by absolutely no will. It doesn't feel like that. It feels much more like a absolute synchronicity, or a momentary will that is not personal at all, moving with everything in synchronicity, without friction, without effort, without hesitation. So true spontaneity. Nothing is negated here. So to see through personal will, you don't negate personal will, you just see through it. To see through the illusion of separation, you don't negate it, because that will solidify some kind of view at some point. You just see through it. It's all about clear seeing. So look closer at everything, every experience, every perception, every arising identity. Look closer and closer and closer. Don't try to make it do anything. Don't try to make anything happen. Don't try to make anything change. Don't try to make anything stay the same. Just be willing to see it for what it is, feel it for what it is, hear it for what it is. At some point, this experience of non-agency, which isn't even really an experience because an experience is in time, an experience is a memory. This isn't a memory. This is full participation with no separation, no agency, no personal aspect, no impersonal aspect. Purity of flow, clarity. It's incredibly light, simple, no big deal, ordinary, also extraordinary. So put that lens aside for a moment and see what happens. Keep looking closer and closer and closer until you see that the lens itself doesn't exist. And things get infinitely more simple and more peaceful.